package a guest lecture or webinar as strong EB1 evidence. Now, this is something that I have noticed in the EB1 market nowadays, is the proclivity of you wanting to reach out and bother your professors from undergrad who you have not seen in 10,000 years, or your masters who you have not talked in a billion years. Go and say, "Sir, if you want me to give a guest lecture, please let me know. I will come and give guest lecture." Why? Like, how do you think this is going to help in your EB1 profile? And the first answer from people's mouth is, "Oh, it's going to help me in my final merits determination." But how high? The way people think about final merits, I've realized, is this concept that I had learned in interpersonal arguments, which is called kitchen sinking. This is where, when you're having an argument with your partner, let's say that you're arguing about who's taking out the trash, and you have taken out the trash 5 times, and you were counting on your partner to take out the trash this time and they did not, and you start arguing about who's taking out the trash can, and before you know it, you're blaming each other's mothers. Like, how did it go there? Because when you're having a heated argument, you do something called kitchen sinking. That is, you're throwing everything in the kitchen, things that are irrelevant as well. And that is the proclivity that I have seen people have when they think about final merits, because they assume that whatever does not fit neatly into any of the EB1 criteria, I can just throw it in final merits, and hoping by the sheer volume and the variety of it, the USCIS office is going to be like, "Oh my gosh, this person is at the top of the field." When in fact, USCIS does not look at final merits that way. They look at final merits to come to the assessment that this person, beyond just satisfying the regulatory requirements of these criteria, look at me using big words, they want to see your profile as a whole, which gives them the impression that they have emerged at the top of the field. Now, when they are assessing that squishy standard, the first thing that they're going to look at is sustained acclaim, that you have had a trajectory of excellence. Now, if they see that just like your hackathon judgment and your authorship and all your talks, it has happened in the last 2 years, then it really does not help your final merits now, does it? But there are other ways in which you can use these guest lectures. The first thing I want you to do is send an invitation to your professors with a better pitch. Don't say things like, if you want me to give you a talk, it's not their headache to think of something that you can talk about to their students. Do your homework. Look at what these students are learning. Look at the syllabus. See what gap your knowledge can close, and pitch it accordingly. An even smarter approach to do that, if you have an original contribution, you can use these guest lectures to increase the visibility and the impact of that contribution and the recognition of that contribution. For example, I did not use it, but now that I am so wisdomous in EB1, I could have leveraged it in this way. At the very end of my academic career, I wrote a book on college hookups. I was just using my internal assessment to figure out these strategies. I really did not have anybody to bounce these ideas with. But now that I have observed people and know how USCIS mechanism works, I'm like, oh, okay, I could have used it to show this. What was that? So when I launched this book, I knew that only writing a book does not show off major significance of original contributions. Yes, my book is an original contribution because it's novel. It has never existed before. The research is new. But if nobody is buying my book, if nobody is utilizing my book, then it is as good as me directing a movie and nobody bought a ticket to watch the movie. I had to drive people to watch the movie in the theater. The way I did it is as follows. I had a undergrad research assistant at the time. I told her, hey, her name was, I'm forgetting, her name was Mariana, let's say. So I said, Mariana, in the tri-state area, because I used to teach at a university in New York City, I said, make a list of all the universities that are there in New York City. And for each of the universities that you have, find out student clubs. And figure out which student clubs talk about 3 things. Number 1, they talk about Gen Z. Number 2, they talk about sexual respect and sexual awareness. And number 3, they dabble in technology. She created a list of all those student organizations, and I emailed them individually saying that, hey, I wrote this book. These are the findings. I see that your club prioritizes conversations around, let's say, sexual consent or sexual wellness. I'm more than happy to come and give a talk and interact with your club members and help you out in any way. I got 4 invitations. As a matter of fact, I got 6 invitations. Number 1 from NYU, number 2 from Columbia, number 3 from John Jay, number 4 from Arizona State University, number 5 from Tata Institute of Social Services in India, and number 6 from Van Lang University in Vietnam. So all the talks that I gave at these universities, I tied it back to the findings of my research. And I ensured that all of these universities made sure that they worked with their libraries to grab a copy of my book. So there are better ways to utilize these guest lectures than just saying, oh, I'm doing it for increasing my visibility and somehow hope that this is going to help in final merits. There are cleverer ways, more strategic ways of using these guest lectures. One that can bolster other important criteria like original contributions of major significance. So the next time you are hunting down for a guest lecture, remember, unless and until you're doing it for a long period of time where you can show a timeline of excellence, ensure that you're using it to leverage that for other criteria. One could be original contributions of major significance. I hope this was helpful.